Hi guys, welcome to Short Skirts and Sarcasm. I'm Caroline and I've been feeling nostalgia recently, so I compiled a list of books with a nostalgic vibe. This is my own personal nostalgia because I read and loved these books when I was about 10 to 15 years old. So if you want to relive my childhood with me, keep listening for this alphabetized list of books about which I'm nostalgic. Starting with Dancing in the Wings by Debbie Allen and illustrated by Kadir Nelson. And yeah, this is a picture book. However, I loved dance when I was younger, mostly watching it because I'm not very good. But I really love this book. It is about a ballerina who loves ballet, but she's too tall, so she keeps not being cast in things until she finally meets a guy who is also in a dance company who is tall enough for her to be paired with him for a pas de deux. And so this is a great story about following your dreams and being confident in yourself and not being persevering when other people tell you you are too much. Like in this case, she's literally too much because she is so tall. But I think just being called like too much is something that women in particular get told a lot about various things. So it's about not shrinking yourself. And I love that message. I love that it was about dance, and I also love that it had a good message to it. Next, a YA book. I've recommended this in the past, but it is Feeling Sorry for Celia by Jacqueline Moriarty. It's really funny and also like a wild ride. So the main character, Elizabeth, has a flighty best friend who has disappeared. It's not the first time she's disappeared, but this is the longest time. And so she is wondering sort of like what if something's happened to her, or if she's just off on a silly adventure. So the best friend is Celia. And so the entire book is written in letters. Some of them are between Elizabeth and real people, and some of them are fake letters that are sent to her by like fake committees telling her that she's a failure of a teenager because Celia's off having fun, doing adventures, doing teenagery stuff, and Elizabeth is too scared to do anything. So eventually Elizabeth gets over her fear of literally everything and actually does something, and it's a really fun time. There's a bunch of like great weird characters that she meets. And next, Fried Green Tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe by Fanny Flagg. I listened to this audiobook for the first time on a road trip with my mom, and it was just an overall fun, funny, wholesome experience. So this is about ostensibly it is about two women, Ruth and Iggy, who run the Whistle Stop Cafe. That is one timeline. They run it in starting in the late 20s, maybe early 20s, and then they keep running it all the way through, I think, the 40s and 50s. But the second timeline is of their friend who in the 1980s is in a nursing home where she makes friends with a middle-aged woman who is struggling with menopause, Evelyn, who is visiting her mother-in-law. She doesn't really get on with her mother-in-law, so she wanders around, meets this woman, and essentially listens to all her stories about Whistle Stop and the Whistle Stop Cafe. And at first she thinks like, oh, it's just like this weird old lady who doesn't know manners and won't shut up. And then the old lady is like, well, I never thought that Iggy murdered that guy. And she's like, I'm sorry, what? And the old lady's like, let me tell you about the Whistle Stop Cafe. It's great. And there's a lot of like very wholesome stories. Like there is tragedy that happens in this book, but the overall vibe of it is very like wholesome, hopeful, and strengthened community. Another very nostalgic read for me is the Gemma Doyle trilogy by Libba Bray. This is the books A Great and Terrible Beauty, Rebel Angels, and The Sweet Far Thing. And this is set in the 1890s in a stuffy boarding school where Gemma is sent to live after her mother dies in India. And she makes friends with this group of girls who, two of them are like are like popular girls, and one of them is a charity student, and Gemma is like somewhere in between, and they're an odd match. But then they find out that they have magic and can travel to another realm, which is fun and games until the magic starts to leak out and does bad things in the real 1890s world. So they have to team up and stop it. And it is a wild ride. It is a really fun adventure story, and I have read these again last year and this year to see how these hold up, because they were sort of an early 2000s series, and they hold up really well. You can read them as just like pure fantasy escapism, but you can also read them as a deeper sort of commentary on the social mores and the social structures of 1890s Britain and how that has influenced our society today. Like, you can see that some things have very obviously changed and some things haven't changed at all. So I would really recommend these. I will be rereading these in the future again for sure. Another serial reread for me is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. And this has several very good film adaptations. So if you don't really want to read a 500-page book, you can just watch a lot of the movies. I find a lot of them are very good adaptations. My personal favorite is the June Allison and Elizabeth Taylor version, probably just because I've watched it the most. But I am a really big fan of the 2019 version. I think that's maybe a very close second. So this is about four sisters. It starts out when they're quite young, and they sort of like grow up, have a lot of growing pains. They fight a lot, which is something I really like, because I find like a lot of sort of books written in this time period portray women, especially sisters, as like never having real disagreements and just being quiet and supportive of other characters. But they are supportive of each other. They very obviously love each other, but they have really big conflicts, and it can be quite dramatic at points, but also very like wholesome at other points. And then a book that I loved when I was younger, but now cannot find an actual copy of, I would like to read it again, but I can't right now, is Of Two Minds by Carol Matas. And this is a fantasy like YA book about the main character, whose name I've forgotten. She can read minds, and her family, is she part of the royal family? Yes, she's part of the royal family. Her family is like, okay, you're gonna marry this foreign prince. He can't read minds, so obviously he's deficient. No, it's the other way around. She can imagine things into being. The boy she's supposed to be marrying can't do that, but he can read minds. And so the boy's family is also, I think, a royal family, and they're like, okay, so I'm gonna marry this girl. Oh, her name's Lenora. She can't read minds. I know she's like a bit deficient in this way, but I'm sure you can make it work. And so they meet, immediately hate each other. However, then something goes wrong. I can't remember exactly what, but they have to like go save the realm, and while they do that, they do become friends. So it's not exactly, well, it's kind of an enemies to lovers romance, but like the romance part is like a very small part of this book. Like, it's really about them solidifying their friendship and saving the realm, which has quite a twist at the end. I did not see it coming. I guess I don't usually see twists coming, so maybe that's not much of an endorsement. But I think even if you know the twist, because I have reread this book quite a few times, I got it from my local library, which is why I want my own copy, because I want to reread it again. And knowing the twist doesn't diminish the actual adventure part of the story and the actual character growth part of the story. And then I have The Makioka Sisters by Junichiro Tanizaki. And this is not a YA book at all, and I'm not sure why I decided to read this as quite a young teenager. But it was worth it. It is, again, about four sisters, and they're not growing up. They are adults. Two of them are married, and the overarching plot of the story is essentially the older two sisters trying to get their younger two sisters married off to various successes and failures. So this is set in 1930s Japan, and a lot of it is like little vignettes, snippets of these sisters' everyday lives. There is sort of the overarching plot of the attempted marriage shuffling, but it's really more about like upper middle class life in 1930s Japan and how that works out for women and how it's different for married women versus single women, and how the changing times is sort of affecting the societal structure of Japan, and how the First World War impacted it, and how you can see very obviously the coming of the Second World War in this and how that is going to affect it. So it is a beautifully written book and has a lot of really great characters and great character arcs, and it's like insightful and wonderful, and I really like it. I think it is pretty rare to find a man writing women's characters so thoughtfully, and I think that's a big reason of why this book has stuck with me so much. And then another classic YA 2000s book series is The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants by Anne Brash. I used to think it was Brashers, but then I realized I had missed like an extra R in there, and it's Brasheris. And I'm not sure if it's supposed to be pronounced like that. So if you know, please let me know. But this is about 4 best friends who have very different family lives, but their mothers met in was it prenatal exercise class? Maybe it's postnatal exercise class. They sort of like became friends, brought all their daughters with them on like their various friend outings. The moms aren't really friends anymore, but the daughters have stuck together, and this is their first summer spending time apart from each other. They're all in like different parts of the US and the world. Let's see, Bridget is at soccer camp. One of them is she at home? Carmen is spending time with her dad and her stepmom, and then Lena is visiting her grandparents in Greece. So they decide that because they all fit into this one pair of jeans, that they're gonna like mail it to each other throughout the summer and like wear it and have adventures. And throughout this series, more than just the first book, they have a lot of like character growth and reach a lot of like teenage and early adult milestones, and it's really great to sort of see them grow up and grow as people, but also keep their friendship. And I think that aspect of it is really wholesome. The individual like plots of the books can be very funny, and they can also be very tragic, like a lot of high highs and low lows. So quite an emotional ride, but I think worth it. I loved this book series when I was a teenager and would definitely like to read them again. I do have the books, but they are in storage, so one day I'll get them back. And then another classic sister book, it is Wives and Daughters by Elizabeth Gaskell. I love the mini series made of this as well, and the book is great. It's a very long book. I think it's 700-ish pages, and because it's so old, can sort of sometimes err on the side of too wordy. But overall, it's a very wholesome, nice book. This is about, what's her name? Molly, whose doctor dad, after years of widowhood, decides to marry this woman, Hyacinth, who was a housekeeper. She was a nanny. I can't remember. She used to work at the big house, and she has a daughter, Cynthia. So they get married. Molly gets a new stepsister who they're very unlike each other, but instead of where like this could take a dark turn of them not liking each other, they get on really well and develop a really close friendship bond, and have a real sister bond. And that is in my opinion, the main part of this story is them growing up together, and like there are growing pains, like are they in love with the same boy? Yes, they are. And stuff like that. And then there's also the sort of plot of a lot of books written at this time, which is the parents trying to get them to marry suitable people. So if you like Pride and Prejudice in sort of that vein of like 1800s sister relationships and courting relationships, and I think you'll like this too. If you just like books about sisters, then I think you like this too. This was in my books about sisters dedicated video, so you can go watch that if you want more sister content. And because this horse starts with a W, this was my last book on this list. So I hope you had fun traversing the nostalgia of my childhood. I certainly had fun. And thank you for watching. You can like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.